On September 2nd, 2025. President Donald Trump was at the White House answering questions from reporters about an incident that had happened just a day earlier. An incident involving Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, one of the most powerful people in Europe. Pay attention to his response.
About controlling the sky. On Sunday, the satellite signal from Ursula von der Leyen's plane was with...
Ursula.
She had an interesting...
event. She's a tremendous woman. And so what are you asking me about her? No one knows its origin, but they took her phone privileges. No, sometimes that's a good thing.
Sometimes that
could happen to me, I'd be very happy.
Trump took it as a joke. But what he didn't know is that behind this joke, there's something much more dangerous. Because while he was talking about taking someone's phone being a good thing, Europe was discovering that it had just suffered a type of attack that can make any plane in the world vulnerable. An invisible attack that has already happened tens of thousands of times, and that can cause a fatal accident. But after all, how exactly do you attack a plane without firing a single missile? And who could have done this? The answer will surprise you. First, let me show you what really happened. On that September 1, St. Ursula von der Leyen was flying to Bulgaria. She wasn't just taking any trip. Von der Leyen was on a special tour of the European countries closest to Russia. The goal? Well, she wanted to see up close how the Russian hybrid war was affecting those countries. So, when her plane was preparing to land on Bulgarian territory, something strange happened. The Global Positioning System navigation system started to fail. The satellite signals simply disappeared. The pilot completely lost the ability to know where he was. Ironic, isn't it? Imagine the scene. You're flying a plane with one of the most important leaders in Europe on board. Suddenly, all your navigation instruments stop working. You don't know exactly where you're flying. You don't know if you're on the right path to the airport, and even worse, you don't know if you have enough fuel to reach your destination. Luckily, Bulgarian air traffic control responded fast. They offered an alternative landing method. Using ground navigation, von der Leyen managed to land safely. But here's an important detail. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a technical failure. This was a deliberate attack. The technique used is called Global Positioning System jamming. It works like this. Special equipment on the ground sends very strong signals toward the plane. These signals are more powerful than the signals from the Global Positioning System satellites in space. When this happens, the aircraft's navigation system gets completely confused. It's like someone shouting so loudly in your ear that you can't hear anything else around you. The result is devastating. The pilot can fly completely off course. He could accidentally enter the airspace of a hostile country, or he could get so lost that he can't find an airport to land before running out of fuel. In any of these scenarios, what starts as Global Positioning System jamming ends in tragedy.
You'll see later, when we get close to Ukraine, a bunch of our systems will go down, and they'll just, we still have the initial navigation system, which helps us, but the global positioning system, they'll disappear, and the worst part is detection. So, because of jamming, the plane might think it's in a different place than where it actually is. Basically, it could tell us that we're flying into a mountain at this altitude that is... It's not logical, but it has happened before. And we train to avoid it. So we have certain procedures and certain instincts. That sometimes happens when traveling through Ukraine. That also happens in the northern part of Norway. And actually, sometimes it gets close to
Kaliningrad. First, Russia has both the technical capability and the motives to do this. Second, the timing when this happened was just too perfect to be a coincidence. Von der Leyen was actually investigating Russian hybrid warfare tactics when she was attacked. It's as if someone wanted to give her a practical demonstration of what Russia is capable of doing. And third, when confronted with the accusations, the Russian response was similar to others they've given before. The Kremlin simply said your information is incorrect. Just that. They didn't give any extra explanation, no justification, they just denied it. But here's what makes it even more disturbing. This wasn't an isolated case. Actually, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, tens of thousands of global positioning system jamming incidents have been reported by airlines operating around the Baltic Sea. Tens of thousands. These aren't just a few sporadic attacks, it's a systematic campaign. In March 2024, a British Royal Air Force plane suffered a similar attack. On board was Grant Shapps, who at the time was the United Kingdom's defense minister. The plane was flying near Kaliningrad, the Russian enclave in the Baltic. Suddenly, the global positioning system started showing completely false information. The system said the plane was in a totally different place. This is even more dangerous than regular jamming. If jamming blocks the signals, spoofing replaces them with fake signals. It's like someone changed all the traffic signs in your city to point in the wrong direction. You think you're following the right path, but in reality, you're being led to the wrong place. Bulgaria confirms that jamming and spoofing attacks have increased drastically since February 2022. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Sweden, Finland, and even Poland and Germany have been affected. Now, Russia might try to argue that this is just collateral damage, that they are using jamming to protect themselves from Ukrainian drones, and that some signals end up affecting neighboring countries accidentally. But Bulgaria is separated from Ukraine by Romania and Moldova. It's impossible for a signal intended to block Ukrainian drones to reach there by accident. There are strong indications that it was on purpose. And that's where things get really interesting, because when Europe decided to strike back, something completely unexpected happened. The European Union's initial response seemed strong and coordinated. First, they accelerated plans for the 19th package of sanctions against Russia. To give you an idea of the scale, the European Union had already implemented 2,782 sanctions against Russia. 2,782, and that was just the number from the European Union. France alone had 2,711 sanctions, and the United Kingdom had 2,333. Second, Europe announced plans to launch new satellites into low orbit. These satellites will help detect global positioning system jamming attempts more quickly, giving pilots more time to react. And third, the most dramatic response of all, Europe has started discussing sending tens of thousands of European soldiers to Ukraine as part of a security guarantee, post-conflict. Von der Leyen was confident. She said that President Trump had guaranteed American support for this operation, that there would be an American presence as part of the backup, that this had been made very clear and repeatedly stated. Everything seemed to be going in the right direction. Europe was showing unity. It was demonstrating that it would not be intimidated. It was sending a clear message to Putin. But then, something went wrong. Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, decided to publicly criticize von der Leyen. He said it was fundamentally wrong to discuss plans to send European troops to Ukraine at that moment, that the European Union has neither responsibilities nor authority when it comes to deploying troops. Pistorius was essentially saying that von der Leyen was lying, that there was no concrete plan, that she was confirming or commenting on considerations that should not be discussed publicly. And I don't know if you noticed, but all of this connects with the incident we explained earlier. Everything indicates that Putin was not just trying to intimidate von der Leyen. He was playing a much more sophisticated game. Let me explain it to you better. Look, hybrid warfare is not about causing direct physical harm. Hybrid warfare is a type of psychological warfare. The goal is not to bring down von der Leyen's plane. The goal is to make Europe start fighting with itself, and it worked perfectly. Think about it. Russia launches a relatively small attack, a bit of global positioning system jamming. No one gets hurt. No permanent damage is done. But the European response was so uncoordinated that now you have the defense minister of one of the most important countries in the European Union publicly arguing with the president of the European Commission. Russia managed to make Europe split, using an attack that cost practically nothing and left no physical evidence. It's hybrid warfare at its best, or worst, depending on your point of view. Maxim Beznoziuk from the Atlantic Council explained this perfectly. A few days before the attack on von der Leyen, he wrote that Russia spent more than a decade refining its hybrid warfare playbook. Many of the tactics being used today were created or perfected during the first Russian campaign of aggression against Ukraine. Europe, on the other hand, is far behind. Beznoziuk argues that Russia favors hybrid warfare because it allows the Kremlin to destabilize Europe and undermines support for Ukraine, without crossing the line and provoking a military response. And most importantly, Europe's response to Putin's hybrid warfare tactics has also been hampered by the lack of coordination among the targeted countries. And that's exactly what we saw happen after the attack on Ursula. The lack of coordination that Beznoziuk mentioned materialized in the public dispute between von der Leyen and Pistorius. The lack of coordination is clear. While they argue publicly, Russia continues to do exactly what it wants. Hybrid warfare is like an attack on the very conscience of the European continent. It is both psychological and physical. The goal is to create problems. Any problems among those who need to be united to deal with Russia. And it seems to be working. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, made this clear after Trump met with Putin in Alaska. Peskov said that Russia has a negative attitude towards discussions about NATO troops operating on Ukrainian territory. That from the very beginning, it was the advance of NATO's military infrastructure and the infiltration of this military infrastructure into Ukraine, which could probably be named among the root causes of the conflict situation that arose. In other words, Russia is saying, send whatever you want, but don't put Western soldiers in Ukraine. And if you do that, we will consider a greater escalation in the conflict. But here's the problem. Most members of the European Union are also members of NATO. Any refusal of NATO troops in Ukraine is practically a refusal of European troops. So, if Putin manages to keep Europe divided, he essentially blocks any significant European military response. And that explains a lot about the real intentions behind a simple global positioning system attack. It's a masterstroke in hybrid warfare. And while Trump was making jokes about taking someone's phone away, and while European leaders argue among themselves about how to respond, the Russian hybrid warfare campaign keeps escalating. If Russia was able to attack the most powerful woman in Europe like this, and if it managed to make Europe itself start fighting because of it, what else can it do? And you, what do you think? Will Europe be able to unite to face this hybrid war? Tell us in the comments, what's your opinion? If this video opened your eyes to how modern warfare works, share it with someone who needs to understand this too. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes about the conflicts that are shaping our world. See you next time.